Welcome back.
Welcome back.
It's the last module. I feel like it should be like that. Thank you so much for staying with us while we go through the very basics of deploying a Node application or creating a Node application. Using Mongo, using Jade, Express, all those great things. And now we're towards the very end, the last module of the day. I'm going to start just like doing that with my words where they all kind of run together. Last module of the day. And we're going to start talking a little bit more about Azure, how it works, how you can deploy stuff, how you can take any of these kind of things that you're working on, whether it be Node or variety of other open source projects and get them up on Azure, how you can debug them.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing, right? Because sometimes your environment's not exactly the same. And you kind of put it out there and you hope it's going to work. And then you're just like, I don't know what's going on here. So you need to be able to debug. And it's really important. So we're going to kind of cover over some of those things. And so this module is all going to be about deploying and debugging. A couple of things that we're going to cover. We're going to look at Azure Websites Overview. We're going to really just go into the dashboard and give you a sense of some of the things that are available, where you find things. This is really handy if you haven't used a lot of Azure because we can kind of quickly point out all of those prime things you might want to know. And then you can kind of explore after if you want to learn about some of the other great things. We're going to talk about deploying to Azure with Visual Studio, deploying to Azure with GitHub. We'll show an example of that already kind of going. And then debugging remote Node applications with Visual Studio. So how do you debug something when it's already up and kind of in production? Mm-hmm. And oh no, what do I do? How do I fix this? So that's usually what happens, right? You get an email or something, it's broken. How do I fix this? So that's what we're going to work on. So if we just kind of dig into Azure Websites Overview, you can easily deploy a bunch of different kind of technologies using Azure Websites. And the Azure Websites, if you haven't, gone over and you don't have a login for Azure, you can get, a free trial. I think it's 90 days. You get a variety of things that you can do with it. If you're already listed in maybe your startup and you're listed in BizSpark, you also get Azure credits that way. So you can start, playing with Azure if you haven't already. And there's a bunch of different things. We're going to focus on deploying, obviously, what we built. Also, just kind of showing you a little bit of the dashboard and Azure Websites. So for Azure Websites, you can deploy a bunch of different kind of websites. We're going to show you Node, but you can do Python. It can be PHP, ASP.NET. There are a bunch of different things. There's lots of stuff that you can install just right out of the box. And so, if you want to use something like WordPress, WordPress, one of the top, I would say, PHP projects of all time, right? And everyone knows WordPress, whether you used it or not. Really good admin, easy admin interface. One-click install. You can go to most hosting companies and have one-click install. Mm-hmm. Super easy, and we can show you just kind of like where those things lie in Azure. Also, you can do kind of pre-configured stacks. So if you're a person who's like, yeah, I'm going to do Mongo and Express with Angular and Node, I'm going to put all that popular good stuff together, you can go and, again, kind of pre-configure that, and all this stuff's available and just like basic Azure Websites. Now, there are a few limitations when you're using Azure Websites, and depending on what you need to do, you need to consider that. But the limitations are so, for the average project, not something that's going to really affect you. One of the things that I came across when I was working with Node is I wanted to configure something on a certain port. I was doing something called Space Brew, which is uses WebSockets based on Node, allows you to connect kind of different technologies together. And I was realizing, I need to configure a port, and I couldn't configure a port on website. So that was one thing that I couldn't do. Sometimes there's some modules for Node that are like native modules that need to be compiled. You can't do that. What's going to happen is when you deploy something using Azure Websites and it's using Node, it's going to look at your package JSON, and it's going to basically npm install those things. So it doesn't have the ability to compile anything if anything needs to be compiled. So those are a couple of the limitations of Azure websites. In our case, they don't affect us at all. We don't have to worry about it. But just something to consider. If you need to configure ports or you need to compile kind of native modules for Node or something along those lines, you probably want to look at doing something like a VM or that kind of thing and setting up an instance that way. So if we look at Azure websites, there's a bunch of things that you can do. So you can configure a custom domain. Let's say you have a custom domain and you want to change the kind of default domain, and we'll show you that process. You can do that. You can FTP to it. Using Azure, you can run multiple websites. And the way that I tend to use it quite a bit is, again, for production and staging environments, where I'll actually have, two websites kind of running. One will be my staging environment and a different URL for my production environment. And that way, they live on different URLs. They have different environments. They're getting deployed from two, different code sources. I usually use Git, to be honest. So I'll deploy from GitHub. And so I'll take a branch. For example, I'll have two branches. One might be master, one might deploy. So one will be staging, one will be, production. I tend to use a Git flow kind of way of working in that sense. So it's good for those kind of things. So I'm going to pop into the Azure portal. Once again, if you don't have access, you can sign up for a trial. It's good for 90 days. Once you get used to the interface and you walk in, you start to realize, wow, this is like, for me, this is, if I have to start setting up servers or deploying stuff, this is kind of how I want to work. So when I've got the portal already kind of. I'm logged in. I'm working in a different browser because I need to avoid the cookies. Otherwise, I can't log in as my own user. Long story short, we're looking at Azure, and what I've done is all these kind of items that are on the left. You'll see all these things that you can do, and there's so many options here depending on what you're doing. Now, only a couple of things here is really going to affect us, but to walk you through quickly, you've got websites, you've got, like I said, VMs, you've got virtual machines. So you could run Mongo in a VM if you wanted to. You could there's a bunch of different ways to set things up. You've got mobile services, something we talked about in the past. You need to create a REST API really quick. You could definitely just tap into mobile services. Doesn't matter if it's iOS or Android or any of those things. Cloud, you got your databases, storage. You can just use it for storage. Just like upload your, treat it like you're going to upload all your pictures there, whatever you need to do. There's media services. There's Visual Studio Online, and that's something that we don't really have time to cover too much. But we have a new project called Monaco, where basically you could be just in the browser, pulling what you need and deploying right from there. So definitely look up Monaco and Visual Studio Online for that as well, because that's another way that a lot of people really love to work with Node.
It's got some special support for some of the things that we've been using, like Node, JavaScript, HTML5, CSS. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Python too, fantastic. I believe. Yeah. There's a bunch of things, and it's a really nice way to work. It's got a command kind of line that you start working in, and you can basically install what you need to install. It's a great way to work. But we're going to focus kind of on websites and just kind of show you just quickly how you can create your own website, and we're going to work on deploying a website as well, right? So in terms of websites. You can create new websites quite easily. And so I just hit the new button at the bottom. Now, everything that you want to do in terms of creating, modifying, deleting, things that are relating to what you're looking at, it's usually just at the bottom. So this is the current portal. We have a new portal that's in preview. So you could also take a look at the new portal, but I'm going to work with the current one. And if you look over, you create a website. You can do quick create. You can do custom if you need certain options. You can do gallery. Now, I'm not going to necessarily do from gallery here, but I just kind of wanted to show you what's available to you. So if you are a person who has to set up servers, and I know previously I'm used to going in and basically configuring everything from scratch and doing all that kind of work. A lot of this stuff is almost prepackaged from gallery. So depending on what you want to do, there's some common things. If you're a PHP person, Cake PHP is a really common framework. Once again, click install. It gives you what you need and configures it how you need. You can do, there's an HTML empty site, there's Ghost, a bunch of different things. Even towards the bottom, you've got, basic kind of things. There's WordPress if you want to do WordPress, right? You click it, you basically tell it what database to use, and then a bunch of those kind of things, and you're good to go. It's very, very quick. So, you can do it from gallery if you want. So for me, I'm just going to go and just to, kind of quick create a website. What you do is you specify a URL, and what's going to happen is that Azure is going to create this website for you, and it's going to give you this default URL. Now, let's go test Stacy. My first name, your last name, Rami. So, you've got, basically that's going to be the URL is whatever you put in here appended to the Azure websites.net. And then you got your web hosting plan, which is, free. If you have a free trial, for example, I'm running on here, you're doing all this for free. So you can just basically host it. And you can create website. Now, I don't need to configure a database or anything particularly right here. I'm just kind of setting up a website. And so I see that it's listed here and that it's running. I can see how it's running. I can see the URL. I can click it. And it's like, oh, this website has been successfully created. So it means that I need to put something there at some point. But once we go in, there's a couple things that you need to know just about this that's going to help us when we're working, especially with deploying from something like Visual Studio. Mm-hmm. And so looking at the dashboard here, if you click up top, your dashboard kind of gives you your overall view, right? And so some of these things will go more into depth once we've deployed our Node application. But just to kind of point out a couple of these things is that, your dashboard kind of gives you, like all dashboards, your quick overview to your site. And so you can see on the right things that you might need at some point in time. You want to FTP to your, let's say that's how you like to work. You want to FTP some stuff. You can set up deployment credentials, for example. You can view any kind of connection strings. You can deploy from source control, which is something we'll kind of just like click through later in the session. And so you start to see, where these things are. Now, if I didn't want this to be my URL, which as intuitive and rolls off the tongue as it does, I might want to create, I might want to go buy a domain and change that. And you can easily, go and do that, and you just got to set a couple of things in a DNS record, and you're kind of good to go. So, very quickly setting up a website, there's a whole bunch of other tabs that will go into detail about. Monitor is something that we'll probably take a look at once we've deployed something and explain a little bit about it a little more. But you start to see a good overview of what's happening with your site. You can see the versions that you're running. So this is really important, especially if you're working. How many times have I done this where I've deployed something that's PHP and it's the wrong version and I'm using some new feature? So you can, easily change those items that you might need. You can go through WebSockets, all the rest of it, and once again, domain names. And figure out those things. Maybe you need verbose logging to see what's going on with your site. You can turn it on. So you can start to see, some of these things that are available to you, scaling, configuring, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But just setting up a simple basic website, we've kind of created something. We could push something up there a variety of different ways, however we want to do it. Yeah. So, going over, basic, that's your basic website. And once again, you can work with just basic HTML. It can be Node. It can be Python. We don't care. We like them all. And being able to deploy them all, especially from Visual Studio, is one of those really lovely things. So I kind of did a basic view of the Azure dashboard. Should we go a little bit more into detail? Do you want to talk about any of those things in particular?
Yes, there's one thing that I definitely do want to talk about, and if you can take us back to the configure tab.
Sure. 1 second.
All right.
You ask, I deliver.
Okay, configure.
Yeah.
There is a WebSockets tab. Yeah, so ideally you want to actually turn that on.
Right.
Otherwise your WebSockets will just not work.
Right.
And there's an interesting thing about the WebSockets backend for Microsoft Azure. If you're curious, you could just read more about that on the different blog posts that I posted in the GitHub repo. If you look at the README, there's a link to a bunch of blog posts. The last one will go into more detail about specifically some of the things that happen in the behind the scenes to make WebSockets work.
Oh, nice.
For Node versus other languages.
Right.
But ideally, you need to turn it on.
Yep.
And you need to add something to your web.config file. It's all covered in the blog post, a little bit too much detail for this MVA, but it is there, and for the most part, it is already set up for you, so you don't need to worry about it. The minute that you turn it on, you're good to go.
And there's other, depending on what you're doing too. And configure is the high-level configuration stuff. So if you're doing WebSockets, you want to, maybe you're going to deploy this, and then you're going to decide you're going to edit it in Visual Studio Online. You can click it on, whatever you need to do. You know, it's right there for you.
And the nice thing is that you get SSL support for free with Azure websites, because normally you have to pay extra for that, or it's a little bit complicated to set up. With Azure websites, you get it for free. You just need to put up your certificate. And this is actually really useful for WebSockets in the case where you need secure connections between your browser and the website.
Yeah.
And it also becomes very useful when you want to certify that your WebSocket connection is coming from something that you served as well.
Yeah.
So if the minute that it's in a secure connection, it basically ensures that this WebSocket information is coming from something that I serve and not from some random other browser or something.
And actually thinking of that too, in terms of the certs that you need and whatnot. I remember I was using PHP, and I was installing. I was using SendGrid for email, because we don't have email support necessarily right out of the box. So for PHP, I was just using SendGrid API, which is it's so easy to configure.
Super straightforward.
But one of the problems was I go to run it, and I had to check the logs, and I realized, one of the libraries it was using, it was looking for a cert. Like there had to be a cert somewhere, and it wasn't there. So all I had to do basically was go in, create that cert, provide it, and I was done. I didn't have to worry too much about it.
Now, one last thing. So we've talked a lot about setting environment variables. Mm-hmm. Now, the configure tag is actually where you do that. So if you scroll down the configure tab, there's two places where you can set the connection strings to your MongoDB sites. The first one is using the connection strings at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So you can literally type for a name Mongo Lab URI, the one that we use in our code base, set the value of that.
So if you want to do Mongo Lab
_ URI, that was the one that we used. Mm-hmm. You can set the value for that, and then you can put custom in the drop-down. Now, what this is going to do. Azure is going to prepend a snippet of text at the beginning. That's the custom string text that you see in the code base, and we need to prepend that into the code base, because Azure will do that automatically. So if you accidentally put the whole thing in the connection string, you won't be able to connect to your MongoDB.
Yeah, because you got to repeat what
I actually fell into that trap about a week ago.
I think everyone does though, because you're like, oh, why? Oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, it's like, why can't I connect to Mongo? What's going on? The other thing, you can also use app settings, although it's not really recommended for connection strings.
Right.
And it's going to be a little bit different in that if you try to put the fully qualified name that's in the code base under app settings, Azure will not let you do that.
Oh, nice.
It'll recognize this is a connection string. It'll be like, no, you need to put it on the bottom thing. But you can still use it. You can still use like other naming conventions. Let's say you wanted to say, okay, I just want to say Mongo. Sure. That's my environment variable. You can put that in the app settings, and you're good to go.
Yeah, so like if we were doing something that was along the lines of like, a Facebook secret, right? We could put in the value here, and then we could access that or whatever. So that way you're not worrying about it in your code base. You're just going to access kind of those environment variables, and it's, where it should be, right?
Exactly. And the other cool thing is that you don't need to put this stuff in your source code. whoever has production access just needs to put it in the app settings, and they're good to go.
Yeah.
It's not in the source code. It's safely away.
Yep.
It's hidden, and it just works very well that way.
Yeah, and I don't know how you work personally, but I know locally I'll definitely probably store those in a configuration file. I might go set them up in environment variables depending on how I'm working. I might do a variety of things.
Yeah, that's one way to do it.
And then I'll clean them out before I actually commit it remotely.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll actually do a git ignore on that file, for example.
Exactly. I do something similar. I add it to the git ignore file. I'll have my custom config. I'll load it through a tool that I use to run Node.
Yeah.
And then it just works perfectly fine.
Yeah. So it's just something to consider when you're working with those things.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome. So we kind of went over a little bit about the dashboard. There's a ton of stuff. And once again, feel free to hit us up with any questions you might have about any of those things, and we'll answer them the best that we can. I mean, Azure is a big
platform.
It's huge. There's a lot that it can do. So we're showing you a little snippet. So we're going to talk about deploying to Azure with Visual Studio. And so one of the nice things that you've seen throughout the day is that we've been continually working in Visual Studio, editing our code, looking at all the different file types. We can create Node apps from scratch using any of the templates with the Node.js, tool for Visual Studio, debugging it, all those kind of things. So when we're deploying, why step out of Visual Studio now? Why not just stay in Visual Studio? So we're going to talk a little bit about deploying to Azure with Visual Studio and how you do that, and demo a little bit about how that works.
Yeah. So let's just switch over to my screen. And I just want to show you something that's really, really cool. So we've been using the command prompt. We've been using the command prompt to execute our Node app, but you can actually run your Node app straight from within Visual Studio. And the way you do that,
show me how.
I will show you how. All you need to do is once you're in a project, you can set it as the startup project right here. And the minute you do that, you get
wait,
these...
can you go back and do that again? I was watching, but then I was like,
you right-click, find set as a startup project.
Perfect.
The minute you set that up and you're in this project, you'll notice right up here that you've got this interesting debug option where it basically says debug Internet Explorer. Now, it's not what it actually looks like, but...
What do you mean?
Well, here's the thing, because I don't know about you, but when I see this, I'm like, play Internet Explorer. That's what I see, right?
Yeah, I would assume it would launch that.
Yeah. So actually, what's going to happen is it's going to launch Node and IE.
Oh, gotcha.
And what's
so it's
cool
doing that whole work of opening the browser for you, so you don't have to
exactly. And what's really cool is you can also set other browsers as well. So in case you wanted to, I think locally on this machine we've only got Firefox installed. But let's say you also wanted to use the Windows Phone emulator. Yeah. So you can also launch to Windows Phone, which is pretty cool. So if I do it this way and I launch it with debug mode, I can actually go into my code and attach breakpoints, and the debugger will break whenever it reaches each of these points.
Oh, nice.
And this is all available to you when you install Node tools for Visual Studio. Right. It has all that support, including the syntax highlighting, including a whole bunch of other stuff, and it just sets you up correctly.
Awesome.
And that's what
that's what we've been saying. A lot of awesome stuff.
Awesome and stuff. Yeah. So we've got debugging covered. You've got most of the tools that come with Visual Studio for debugging set up. You can set different release cycles, release modes. Now, here's the thing about deploying to Azure with Visual Studio. You need to take a quick look at web.config. And the web.config is essentially the information that you need to deploy a Node project of any kind to Azure.
Right.
And what's really cool is that you can even set things like app settings in your Node, so you don't have to manually put it in the configure tab. And I wouldn't do this for sensitive information, because this web.config file is going to exist inside your source code repo. Yeah. I would put them on another way. Yeah. But for settings that are more straightforward, you can leave them in here.
Yeah,
there's a few
non-sensitive settings.
Non-sensitive settings.
The non-sensitive ones.
Exactly. Now you'll notice that you've got a few other system web server settings. The only important one here is that the Websocket enables actually put the false. which sounds a little counterintuitive, but there's a whole reason behind this. And if you wanted to read more about it, go to the blog. But essentially, basically, what it means is that by setting this to false, we are telling IIS, the server that's running the Azure website, not to use its implementation of WebSockets, but to actually run the Node.js implementation.
Gotcha.
It's
so
something,
this is configuring,
something back-end.
This is more about, it's not about you, Node, as much as it is about the server that's going to handle all that stuff. Gotcha.
Yeah. So now what's really cool about the rest of this file is it's very simple. You've got the IIS node here that says, hey, watch out for any of changes that happen to any .javascript file. So anytime I push an update to my website, if there's a change to a .js file, it will restart the website and it will just keep functioning.
Oh, nice.
So you don't need to manually do that. It'll just work the minute you push something. And that's why doing something like GitHub push tends to work very well, because the minute I just commit something like source control, any source code changes to a JavaScript file will restart my server.
Yeah.
So you don't need to worry about that.
That's actually, that reminds me just about something that we never really talked about with just running Node locally, or at least running Node, is that, if you're doing something, especially if you're starting out and you have a major error and it crashes your server, or you update a file, the way that we're running Node right now, it's not going to update it automatically. It's not going to restart that server. You have to go in and redo that again. So if you're making changes, you need to go and change that again. Now you can get certain modules, obviously. Of course, there's a module for everything. There's a module for that. And so you can go and get modules that will do that for you. Like, I think Forever Monitor or one of those that will basically...
Forever will keep running Node, even if it crashes. It'll just rerun it again forever.
Right. So it's just one of those. It's forever. But it's really handy when you start working with those things, because, it's not just about Node crashing, it's about those changes. Because you might change something and then it doesn't matter. It's not going to, address those changes. So you need to go and basically restart the server.
Yeah, the last thing that I would say you should pay attention to in here, and that's only if you want to ever change it, in this line 27, you've got app.js, and this is the place where we're telling the IIS node module that this is the entry point to our app.
Right, so if we named it something different,
if you named it like server.js, you need to make sure that you change it here, otherwise the website won't know what to run.
Right.
Now that we've taken a look at this, there's one last thing I want to show you. And that is the web.debug.config file. And this is the debug version of this web config file.
Right.
And these two files are actually you only need the web config file to deploy to Azure websites.
Right.
But if you ever wanted to use debugging tools, you actually can. And now the neat thing about debugging and remote debugging on Azure websites, and I'll show you how to actually do that a little later, it actually uses WebSockets to debug.
How meta. I heard you like WebSockets, so I'm going to put some WebSockets for your WebSockets.
You debug your WebSockets using WebSockets.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It really makes sense, though, when you think about it. It's an amazing implementation for it.
It is, and if you look at it, essentially what they do is they add a little handler that is basically a WebSocket proxy for Node.js Tools Debugger, and it just gets up and running. Now, we won't start remote debugging right away. I actually want to show you how to deploy first.
So that debug config, is that something you create? Is that something that is...
So it's created right away whenever you do new project with a basic Node.js website.
Gotcha.
Let me show you what that is, because I don't think we mentioned it.
Yeah, no. So if you want to start a new project in Visual Studio, we opened up previous projects, so we didn't start anything from scratch.
But if you wanted to... you basically go File, New Project, as I did real quickly right there. And then you want to scroll down. I know, I'm sorry, I did a little too quick.
Fast clicking,
fast typing. It's not good at all. Okay, so you want to go into Templates, and then JavaScript, and then Node.js. And in there, you've got a bunch of different options, and among them is a basic Azure Node.js web application, and even a basic Azure Node.js Express application. And of course, you can go online and find more templates, but these are the ones that you need to get started, and this will get it set up so that you can actually right-click on the project and be able to publish to Azure websites. And it will also include the web config files.
Perfect. So you don't have to worry about doing those from scratch or anything.
No, I mean, I wouldn't be able to remember it at all.
I know, that's why I can't. I know where to go change things, but if I had to do from scratch, anytime I've had to do any kind of those server things like that, I never remember. I always have to look it up.
Yeah. So let me show you how to publish. Are you guys excited? Hopefully you are.
I like the way you said it. Are you guys excited? I hope you are.
I think it's toward the end of the day and my voice is slowly...
it's slowly going. But you know...
But I will try really hard.
Show me how. Show me how.
All right, enough talking, more showing.
Yeah.
All right, so...
Yes.
Let me do that again because I did it real quick.
I can mime it for you too. If you
I right-clicked on the project and I pressed publish.
Right.
This will pop up a really cool wizard. I was gonna say awesome. I changed. I'm getting all of this attention to me every time I say awesome.
Most people worry about for you got to worry about awesome.
Yeah. All right. So you got different options that you could use. And this is like the publishing target. It's where you want it to go.
Sure.
Now you can also import an existing profile for where you want to push a website to, but in my case, I'm just going to do it from scratch just to show you what the wizard looks like. So the way that you do that is you literally select Azure Websites. Okay, tells me I'm signed in. It looks up to see maybe there's an existing website that I want to publish to.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
But I'm going to create a new one because I like to do everything.
Yeah, you don't want to use my stuff. No, I get it. I get it. Not good enough for you. Whatever.
So I'm going to do test node MVA, and it's going to tell me, hey, this is available, this is good to go. I can choose which region I want to go. I'm going to choose the West US because that's where we're located right now. And
I always forget that. I was like, East.
We're actually both from the East Coast.
Yeah.
So we're always like default is like East US, but we're not there.
Hey, you know what I've been thinking about? This is just a random thought, but I've been thinking a lot about this. Sorry, totally rando, and I know that we're off track. Okay, I've been saying pop all day. I want to pop, okay? So I understand it's soda here, but where is it? What is it in other places? Please let me know. I will check.
Tweet at Stacy.
Tweet at me or let me know in the chat later. I will check. Let's go back to what we should be focusing on.
Awesome, cool.
Things in my brain. Awesome!
Yeah, so we can also create a database in case you ever needed one, and this is going to create a SQL server.
Okay.
But in our case, we don't need a database.
We don't need that.
Because we're going to use Mongo instead. So I can just set node database and press create, and the minute I do that, it's going to do a little progress bar at the bottom, basically saying creating the site. And
I'm working.
In
I am working.
a few seconds, it should be ready to go.
This is where we just
Anytime
wait.
now.
Yeah, we're just quiet and we wait. Because if you watch it, it will work faster.
There we go. So it's run, and the next thing it moves me to is this connection section, and this is going to be pre-filled for you. You don't even need to worry about it. You can just take a look at it. But just out of curiosity, there are other options and other ways to deploy to a website. You can use a web deploy package, FTP. You can just synchronize the file system. However you wish to do it, you can. And I'm going to press next because I do want to show you some of the settings. Now, the settings are interesting in the sense that you can change between debug and release. The minute you go to the debug option, it's going to use the web.debug.config option.
Right.
It's going to use that one. And if you want to use the release mode, it will use that one, and it won't have some of the extra WebSocket debugging tools installed. So just for this exercise at the moment, we're going to use release. Now, I would not recommend you click this because what it'll do is it'll remove additional files at the destination.
Yeah.
So things like Stylus that's automatically generating the CSS, you don't want to have it remove those.
Right.
And you certainly don't want to have it exclude files from the app data folder that you might need. So if you press next from here, what you'll get is this little preview window. And this is really useful to see what's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
So I press start preview.
I love that. It's amazing. Hold on. Before you commit, we're going to let you preview.
Yeah, well, because sometimes the web deploy does not use any repo or any source control. It just takes a look at what has changed.
Yeah.
And for some reason, our preview has failed. That's not good. Try it again. All right. Well, I assure you, normally it works. We won't dwell on it too long. If I press publish, it's going to start publishing, and you'll notice at the bottom that there's this web publish activity, and I believe it's actually going to fail, and there's a specific reason for that. There we go.
You predicted correct.
Awesome. I must be clairvoyant or something. Okay, so the web deploy tool web publish tool will fail a little bit, and the reason for that is because it needs to copy all the files to a temporary location before it can then copy them to the Azure website.
Okay.
Now the issue is that our Node modules tend to have really long file paths because there's all these nested folders in each other.
Sure. Yeah.
So the issue
and version numbers, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So it takes so if you take a look at it, it's pretty long.
Yeah.
And tells you that it's a little too much.
Yeah.
So what you might want to do if you're planning on using the web publish tool is you want to actually close the solution. You don't have to close Visual Studio, just close the solution and move it to the root of your drive, and that typically will solve the problem. Because right now it's on this equally long path. So if I go edit it, it's pretty far up there.
Yeah, sure.
So one thing that I do that I find tends to work really well, I can just Control copy, go to the base of my disk, press copy paste. It will copy.
Get a graph.
Get a nice little cool graph. Windows 8.1.
Boop, 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 boop.
Yeah,
needs sound effects.
It's doing work.
Everything needs sound effects. Be so much better. So just by copying it over, you're reducing the depth of your folders, and therefore, your whole path will be a little bit shorter.
Yeah, and then the web publish tool will
like you again.
It will like me again. Exactly. Did it open the right? Oh no, it opened the wrong Visual Studio. Oh, apologies. I should not have double-clicked on things.
Give us a second. We'll just let this open and then get the right.
Again. You can use Visual Studio Express, actually. It will work.
But you've got the other one configured with everything that you need.
Exactly, and it's signed in. That's the key point.
Yeah.
It's actually signed in. So I won't be able to use a recent solution because it's changed location. I'm going to have to go open project solution, browse to the root of my disk, go all the way down, or not all the way down, and open it from here. Got it open. So you can see I'm logged in as my Azure account. That's the only reason why we are using this Visual Studio and not the Express version, because it's already set up.
I like the name. It's great. It's an ode to us both.
Yeah. All right. Give it a second. It's going to load. All right. Everything seems to be functioning. Here we are again. Let's give this another shot. Now you'll notice the next time I do publish, it's actually going to take the existing settings for me. So in this case, it's going to take me straight to the end.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because all of these settings are going to be saved in this pub.xml file right here.
Oh,
and it's going to contain the name of your website. So you can actually have multiple websites configured, and it will publish every single time correctly. So if I go back and I go publish, I'm hoping that there is enough space on the file path for it to do everything correctly. And we should be able to get things up online.
You know what? If it does and it works, I'm going to celebrate for you with cake.
Awesome.
Yeah. Or pizza. Or both.
Or pizza. I think we're definitely going to have to go get cake afterwards now.
Oh,
and pizza.
Cake. Oh, chocolate cake.
So you see it's working.
Yeah, there it goes.
Everything's good to go. It's adding these files. It might take a little bit of time, but there's a lot of files to add.
Yeah, you can see all the directories.
Yeah, and that's because there's a lot of modules being used. And you can see how the modules sort of tend to nest into each other. Like Express has its own Node modules that it needs to install.
Yeah.
And then they also have their own Node modules, so it can get really long.
Well, I mean, a lot of those modules might have dependencies that they use from other things. So, they've got to go and pull that stuff and maintain that in some kind of a way.
All right, it seems like we're almost done deploying.
You can do it. Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So we've got our test node MVA. Now, in theory, this should give me my chat window. There we go.
Nice.
Success. We've got it. All right. Now I'm going to close this, and I think it's time to show us GitHub.
Yeah, I think so. That's just one way to to deploy. Whoops, sorry. Let me just open up where I should be. That's just one way to deploy a site of some sort. Now, we're not going to walk through all the exact things, but I just want to show you something really quickly because I tend to like to deploy things from GitHub. And so what I'm going to do is just to kind of show you through the examples very quickly is I'm just going to maybe create a new website and then kind of walk you through the steps that you need to do and then what it actually has. Or, you know what, one of these might, yes, I want to leave this. Okay, let's see. I believe one of these is hooked up for GitHub. So one of the things that's dashboard, configure, linked resources. Okay, one more check. Nope, it's going to be this one. Sorry, guys. So one thing about GitHub is that, the way I like to work personally is I like to work locally and push a lot of things up into, we'll use this one for example, but I like to push a lot of things from GitHub because what it means is that I can work locally and I can make sure everything works good and I know it's good, but then I can, basically push my changes to GitHub, my remote repository, whatever it may be, and then Azure will just automatically see that there is something new in GitHub and deploy it for you. And so it kind of creates that whole, continuous, deployment, if you want to call it that, for you. And you don't have to worry about going to, moving anywhere out of your development space that you're doing whatsoever. So, if you wanted to set up deployment from source control. Once again, there's a bunch of ways to deploy. We showed Visual Studio. We talked a little bit about FTP if that's how you like to work. And you can also set up deployment from source control. Now, source control, very vague term, right? I'm talking about GitHub, but source control can be a variety of things. And here's what Azure sees as potential source controls that you might be using. And so we have, again, Visual Studio Online if you want to use that. We have a local Git repository. So maybe you're just working on something a little experimental or whatnot, and you're not ready to really commit that to your remote repository. Maybe you never commit it to your remote. I don't know. Depends on how you work. You might just, choose a local Git repository. You can go and, there's GitHub. It also uses Dropbox. All of these things just go through, and they go through the OAuth required for your credentials, and then you can just pick what you want to do. So if I'm doing GitHub, I'm just going to kind of show you here. I'm going to have to put in my username and my password, which is password. Kidding, I would love for it to be password. And I can start to see what things I might potentially want to deploy. So it gives me the repository, and I can go to Node MVA sample, for example. And I can say what branch to deploy. Now, I only have one branch, for example, in this repository, and it's master, so it's only going to deploy master. But like I was saying previously, if you're a person who likes to have a production and a staging environment, you could create 2 websites you could deploy from GitHub. And so you could choose master to be, your good to go golden kind of production version. And you could use your staging be, your develop branch or whatever you kind of taxonomy you use for calling your branches. Also, maybe you just want to deploy a branch and see what it looks like. So, you basically go through, you do that, and then what's going to happen is it's going to link it. And again, I don't really have anything in the repository to necessarily show in terms of a site, but it's going to take a couple of the files that are there anyways and push it, because I just want to show you more of those files being pushed. And it says, okay, we've linked this for you now. And, if there are items, it'll show momentarily. Now, maybe you just created a remote repository, you haven't put anything in there, and you're just trying to do all of your kind of setting up your environment. And so, it will go ahead and do that. But what it does is you'll start to see now that we have a new item up here, and it's called deployments. Right, and so deployments, once again, it wouldn't matter if it's GitHub or if you're using Dropbox or any of those kind of things, they'll show up under here. And every deployment, every time you make a change, it's going to go ahead and deploy those things. And so we're waiting. It's, it's going through, it's getting the files, and it's going to grab them from GitHub and deploy them. And so now, I can see my comment, for example. I put new structure as a comment here, who authored it. So, if I'm working on a project with multiple people and something's been posted, I can start to see those, deployments happen.
And the ID actually links, I believe, straight to the actual GitHub commit.
Yeah, completely. And so, you start to see all of those commits that are coming down the pipe. And, anytime you make a new change, you push it right from GitHub, and you don't even have to be in here. We just happen to be here now, but you don't have to be in the portal. It's going to show up, and it's going to show up as your active deployment is the one that is currently deployed and kind of staged, and it's out there. And you'll see all your other ones too that, that might have been deployed, the time they were deployed, etc. So, kind of deploying stuff from source control, once again, it's all on how you like to work, and there's a bunch of different options for you. But, deploying from source control is just a matter of, authorizing, picking what you want to choose, making sure that it's out there. And then, from then on, it's just going to look for any kind of changes, and it's always going to go ahead and deploy those kind of things. So, we're showing Node, but maybe you're working in WordPress and you have it under source control. For example, you might be working this way. Maybe you're working on something else along those lines. And so, one more option for you is just hooking into source control. And again, like I said, it really depends on how you want to work.
All right, so now I think the most powerful part of this module, which is remote debugging.
Oh yeah.
This is the
this is when you need a bug all over the screen. Yeah. Sorry, Barry. We're giving Barry just a run for his money today. But yeah, remote debugging. Yeah. Yeah.
So Barry, if you can switch to my Visual Studio. Now, if you remember, we deployed this Node project not too long ago. Now,
5 minutes.
Yeah, literally 5 minutes ago. So here's something that's really cool, and there's this tab called Server Explorer. Now, if you don't see it on your Visual Studio window, what you need to do is just go press View and press Server Explorer, and it will pop up. And among the different options that you do get is Azure. So now, if I click on this, it's going to give me all different services that are available on Azure. The one that I care about is websites. If I click on websites, it's going to go to my Azure account, and me and Stacy are both signed into the same account, and it's going to list the different websites that I have available for me. Now, the one that I had deployed with was this one. If I open this, I'll actually be able to see a bunch of different things. Among them, the files, a folder, and the log files folder. So we've been logging throughout the time, and sometimes we've been using the verbose logging. We can change that setting in the configure tab. Stacy showed us this. What we can do here is that we can actually expand this and be able to see the application logs. So if there's any logging errors, this will download the text file, and there we go. We can see that, in fact, we could not connect to Mongo, which is correct because we did not set the process and the custom URI. And that's fine. We won't fix it at the moment. But the other cool thing is that you also get errors that potentially happen with deployment using Git, and you can trace things and you can see things. Now, here's something that's really cool, and this feature I actually absolutely adore, and this is being able to see the logs in real time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to log files. I'm going to right-click, press refresh. That will get you the application, the logging errors again. Sorry, I went and right-clicked at the wrong place. That is not real-time. That is synchronous. The real-time option.
I was waiting. I was just like, come on. Come on. Show me. Oh.
So the real-time version is when you right-click on the actual website name and you go to View Streaming Logs. Now, if the minute I connect, it'll take me to the last logs, and you'll notice I had a user connected. Now, if someone is trying to connect to my application, I believe someone is, I'm going to, a few folks are entering our page. I can see this all live.
Yeah, we know what you're doing.
We know what you're doing. I don't even know.
Right here.
And the nice thing is that you guys, even if you posted messages on there, they won't be in the database, but we can see you logging in live, which is really cool. And this is all streaming live, so it will follow at the end. And if you press this button, you can download it as well. Now, that's one way to debug what's happening on your Azure website with Node. The other option is being able to actually attach a debugger to your actual Node process. And that will only work if you published using the debug mode. But the minute that you did do that, and let's say that we redo it, but we probably won't because we're running out of time, the minute I press attach debugger with Node.js, it's not going to be able to attach at the moment because the WebSocket debug proxy is not available. But the minute that we do deploy with debug, and you go and you attach a breakpoint to any line of your code, it's going to break inside Visual Studio. So you do not need to try to use your logging mechanism as a way to debug. You can literally debug and step through your code base live, even though it's on Azure. Now, this will also work for other situations where perhaps you've deployed to something other than Azure. You can still attach the debugger to any remote Node process, and the way to do that is by checking out our blog, and you'll be able to see that. See how to do that as well. And this is all part of Node Tools for Visual Studio. It's all available in Node Tools for Visual Studio.
Yeah. You get a lot of love out of the Node tools, from the templates
and the
to
debugging,
the publishing, everything that you need to do. Yeah.
It's a fantastic tool set. So I think with that, we are getting close towards the end, as sad as I am.
Yeah. We definitely are. It's one of those... we covered a lot.
There's so much more we could show you.
Yeah, I mean,
there's just
you guys got time? You want to stick around for a couple more hours? You can order a pizza and just get it done. Yeah, so, we've covered all, ground, at least I like to think, from the ground up, how to work with Node.js. Maybe you have some familiarity, maybe you don't. You can go and try it out and see what's going on. We tried to hit a lot of those things, from Node to Express, Jade, Mongo. I mean, there was a lot that we put in and tried to jam into today. So thank you so much for trying to, stick with us. I hope you guys had as much fun as we did. Awesome!
Yeah, awesome.
Someone said we should have an awesome jar, which I thought was a really great idea, because I would be so rich right now. It would be just like,
and
ding,
I would be
ding,
poor.
Ding. So once again, just a quick reminder that there is a poll. I believe it's down here. And take a poll. We take this feedback very seriously. We try to make these things the best that they can be for you. So if you can take the time to do the poll, that would be awesome. It would be really great, because
awesome.
Yeah, because we utilize that info. So once again, thank you very much. Happy Web Wednesday. Hope to see you again soon.